Back when I started working on my game Capture Hell, I just wanted to make a series of really hard captures to torture my players with. But then I realized most people probably don't like being tortured, so to make Capture Hell less like a torture and more like a video game, I decided to build a world. Obviously, my world needs to have a lot of weird captures, but more importantly, it needs to have a good amount of non-playable characters. Ideally, my game should allow the player to talk to those characters. Hi, Latin letter reverse glottosop with stroke. Oh, I think it might be having a stroke. If you played my favorite space simulator game, Honkai Star Rail, you would know that the best and funniest way to talk to an in-game character is through a message app. Adding a message app in the middle of a bunch of captures can be pretty weird though, so I instead added an entire computer desktop. Now the captures can go into the browser and the message app can be its own thing. My message app currently looks like this though, and I have to build it from scratch. After taking inspiration from one of the most popular message app, WhatsApp, I realized that my message app essentially needs two components, a contact list where all the characters are, and a message window where you can actually talk to them. I decided to start with the contact list first. For each contact, I added a profile picture and a text field to display their name. Then I wrote a script that spawns all the contacts. You're probably noticing that all the contacts are the same. This is completely normal though. We can just wait a few seconds for them to evolve from their common ancestor. I know there aren't any real profile pictures yet, and everything just looks like a solid color. Don't worry about it. The contact list looks pretty good now, but once you started clicking on it, you'd quickly notice that you can actually select multiple contacts at a time. As I learned from WhatsApp though, you should only be able to select one contact at a time. I think this is called a radio button. The idea is that on old radios, when you press one button, the other buttons automatically pop up. Theoretically, this makes sense, but I have no idea what a radio is because I was born after the 2000s. Luckily, a radio button is still pretty simple to program. I think the contact list is complete at this point. Now I know some of you may have noticed that if I add more than 7 contacts, the list starts to overflow. While I could find a way to fix this, the easier solution is just to not have more than 7 friends. Imagine having more than 7 friends. With the contact list out of the way, I moved on to the more important part of this message app, which are the actual messages. If you take a look at WhatsApp, you will notice that each message lives inside a bubble, kind of like our economy right now. I liked how WhatsApp looked, so I created my own green chat bubble for the players' messages and gray chat bubble for the characters' messages. There is a problem though. The chat bubbles are just static PNG images, so when I spawn the messages, all of them are the same size. You might be thinking I could just stretch the PNG images to fit the messages. This is true, but having rectangular stretched pixels in a pixel game could be the end of my game dev career. So instead, I sliced the text bubble into 9 parts. 4 corner pieces, 4 edge pieces, and 1 center piece. The trick is that the corners never stretch so they can stay pixel perfect. The edge pieces stretch along their direction only, and the centerpiece fills the middle. At this point, I posted a YouTube short about this slicing technique, and I was immediately informed by my viewers that this is called 9 slicing, and Unity Game Engine already does this automatically. Now, some of you may think I just reinvented the wheel, but why don't we look at the positive side of things? If I eventually reinvent every feature of the Unity engine, I would have my own game engine. I could even undercut Unity and start my own engine business, which is very profitable. Anyways, to finish the chat bubble, I just had to write a script that resizes them based on the length of the message. It even grows the chat bubble vertically for really long messages, in case one of my characters have issues. And once we switch over to the new chat bubbles, the messages looks a lot better. I would like to take a moment now and talk about the characters in my game. I realized that the term is probably at least slightly confusing at this point, so just to clarify, I'm referring to the actual text characters here. Initially, the characters in my game are basically a bunch of PNG images. I wrote a custom script that arranges these characters to form words and sentences. I thought this was a good idea, since this method allowed me to easily align the character pixels to other pixels. Then I realized each character would actually need its own game object. And if I need to display a really long piece of text, then I would have to spawn more game objects that I'm emotionally prepared to deal with. So I had no choice but to switch over to Unity's built-in text system called TextMush Pro. I don't really understand how Text Mush Pro works, but I think it just turns all of the characters into one big mush. Apparently this is highly optimized because I can just use a single mush renderer to render all of the character mush. With the characters optimized, I wanted to add scrolling to the message window so I can show more than a few messages. Now some of you may ask, why don't I also add scrolling to the contact list so I can have more than a few contacts? To add scrolling to the message window, the first step is to add a sprite mask here, which essentially hides everything outside of it. We can then move the messages up and down for the scrolling effect. As you can see though, the text is not being clipped by the mask at all. Apparently, Text Mush Pro does not interact with the type of mask I'm using. And honestly, I think this is an oversight on Unity's part. To get around this, I actually had to mess with the shaders so the text can be clipped properly. As we're all aware though, working on shader code is a health hazard, so I had to do this as quickly as possible to limit my exposure. Text Mush Pro can finally work with my mask after the modification. Now that my chat messages are clipping properly, I think it's time to hook up the mouse wheel to the scrolling. This is always the most confusing part for me because Windows and Mac OS scrolls in opposite directions. On Windows, when you move your finger down the mouse wheel, you're scrolling down the page, which is very intuitive. For Mac OS, however, when you move your finger down the imaginary mouse wheel, the screen scrolls up. This also actually makes sense, because it's as if you're sliding the page with your finger. Honestly, I think if Windows and Mac OS weren't trying so hard to be polar opposites of each other, the government would be able to stay operational. I don't really know anything about politics though, so I would just add a setting that let the players choose their own scroll direction. Other than the scroll wheel, I also added another way to scroll, which is the scroll bar. This was actually a little tricky to implement. I guess you could say it went off the rails a few times. Eventually though, I was able to get it to work. Now there's still one very important thing missing. The current message app lets you receive messages from the characters, but there's no way to actually reply to them. And that's a big problem because one-sided communication is really toxic. Normally, a message app would have an input box that allows you to send whatever text message you want. But if you haven't caught on at this point, the characters in my game follows predetermined dialogue lines and can't exactly reply to random messages, so the input box is not gonna work here. Imagine if one day computers gained the ability to respond to random messages. We would be chatting with computers. That would be crazy. So instead of an input box, I created a panel that pops up when it's the player's turn to send a message. You will see a few options on the panel and can choose one to send to the character. The character would then be able to give you a scripted reply. Now, just because a message is pre-programmed doesn't mean it can't be meaningful. Just think about all the possibilities. Funny messages, sad messages, and sponsored messages. Wait, sponsored messages? Today's video is sponsored by Brilliant. Have you ever wanted to make a game but struggle with coding? You can learn how to code on Brilliant today. What I like about Brilliant is that it doesn't just teach you how to code. You will learn to think like a programmer by building real intuition for logic and problem solving. Brilliant offers programming courses in Python, the same language used by many popular game engines. And you will get hands-on experience working with real code. It's not just programming though. Brilliant also has thousands of lessons in math, science, data analysis, and AI, and everything is taught in a fun and interactive way. I've been going through their How AI Works course to understand why the robots have gotten so good at solving CAPTCHAs. I'm sure you will also find something that interests you on Brilliant. To start learning for free, go to brilliant.org/internetuser, scan the QR code on screen, or click the link in the description. Brilliant is also giving us 20% off the annual premium subscription, which gives you unlimited access to everything on Brilliant. Now back to the video. After I implemented the input panel, another issue has become apparent. For example, when I send a message to Alice, you can see her responding to me immediately. Though I wish this is what happens on my dating apps, I'm going to try to explain why Alice's reply shouldn't be instantaneous. Let's pretend for a second that we're in 8th grade math. Okay, class, what is a formula for speed? That's right, speed is distance over time. This is so stupid. If Alice's reply is instantaneous, that makes time 0. And any 8th grader would be able to tell you that you cannot divide by 0. And if we think about this intuitively, if time is 0, that means Alice's message is basically teleporting. So to prevent her from being banned by the server, I had to program a short delay between each message. The message app feels a lot more realistic with the added delay now, but the chat bubbles popping into existence still look pretty weird. So I began working on some animation to smooth things out. The first thing I did was to add a fade in and slide up animation to the chat bubbles, and after tweaking the parameters, I'm pretty happy with this. I also added this sliding animation for the input panel, so it pops up smoothly when it's your turn to type. Then I added this ellipsis animation that plays when someone is typing. I needed a way to figure out how long the ellipsis animation should play for. It should take longer to type a longer message, so I could just calculate the animation time based on the number of characters. However, I decided to set the typing time manually for each message instead. It gives me maximum flexibility over the dialogues, and it's also just really funny when Bob takes 2 minutes to type anything. The animation behavior actually becomes very complicated when you have to factor in the scroll bar. This is because it has to stay in sync with the messages. As you can see though, the text exchange is currently not long enough to get the scroll bar involved, so I had no choice but to have Alice aggressively spam text me. And through the magic of editing, the scroll bar actually worked seamlessly on first try. I also made chat automatically scroll to the bottom when there's a new message. I know people tend to get annoyed when they're reading old messages and suddenly gets teleported to the bottom, but since this is a video game, I think it's more important for the players to see the new messages. At this point, the message app is pretty much done, but I don't really know how to conclude this video, so I guess I'll just have Alice make her confession in chat. Alice? Alice? Copyright. I just want to take this moment and give a huge thank you to all of you. I mean, my last video from a month ago was literally about hitting 100 subs, and I can't believe where we are today. Also, Neo recently released a capture game called I'm Not a Robot, and I ran a poll asking if you want to see me play it, and it looks like I'll be doing that. It's going to be pretty different from my usual content, but I think it's going to be an interesting one, so stay tuned. Thanks again for being here, and I'll see you next time.